For 2 years, Lin Ya's world had been the hushed rhythm of Ming Hao's unconscious breath, a silent vigil that was now shattered by the flicker of his eyes. Just as relief washed over her, Xiao Yu, radiant in white, knelt by his bedside, a diamond glittering as she offered her hand in marriage. A slow, knowing smile touched Ming Hao's lips as he reached out, but his voice, clear and cold, cut through the anticipation. "You reek of betrayal, Xiao Yu. Get out." 2 years. 2 years of silent, unwavering devotion to a man whose very breath was a fragile thread. Lin Ya had polished the cold steel of his four-stand, changed his sheets stained with the sweat of fevered dreams, and whispered prayers into the sterile air of his private ward. The world, her adoptive family included, had long written off Ming Hao, the brilliant CEO, trapped in a coma. But Lin Ya hadn't. Every day, her quiet hands, calloused from labor her stepsister Xiao Yu wouldn't touch, had bathed him, turned him, read him financial reports she knew he'd scrutinize if only he could. She'd seen the subtle twitch of a finger, the flicker behind his eyelids, the minute shifts no one else bothered to notice. She had been his shadow, his unsung guardian, while Xiao Yu, the self-proclaimed white moonlight, flitted in for photo ops, teary-eyed performances for the media. Just moments ago, Lin Ya's heart had shattered into a million fragments when Ming Hao, seemingly awakened to Xiao Yu's saccharine proposal, had reached out. The world blurred, a cold despair settling around her as the woman who had tormented her for a decade was about to claim the one person Lin Ya had truly cared for. But then his voice, a steel whip cracking through the hushed room, had lashed out, "You reek of betrayal, Xiao Yu. Get out." A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers. Xiao Yu's carefully constructed facade crumbled, her perfectly manicured hand freezing midair. Her porcelain face drained of color. "Ming Hao? What are you saying?" "It's me, Xiao Yu. Your fiancé." Her voice was a desperate, practiced whimper. Ming Hao slowly pushed himself upright, his gaze, sharp and piercing, impaling Xiao Yu. "Fiancé? You truly have a flair for fiction, Xiao Yu. While I lay unconscious, you were quite conscious indeed, weren't you? With my cousin, Jin Kai, in Paris last summer? Or was it director Li's yacht in Monaco the autumn before? Funny, your undying love for me never seemed to prevent your rather enthusiastic pursuit of anyone with a substantial bank account." He paused, letting the words hang in the stunned silence, each syllable a calculated dagger. Lin Ya felt a jolt of something she couldn't name: shock, vindication, a terrifying, fragile hope. He knew. He had known everything, even when his body was still. Xiao Yu stammered, her eyes darting nervously around the room, searching for an escape. "No, it's slander. You're still recovering, you're confused. Lin Ya, tell him you were there. I was always by his side." She clutched at the flimsy threads of her lies, her gaze, momentarily meeting Lin Ya's, filled with a venomous plea. But Ming Hao cut her off, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper that still carried throughout the room. "And you, Xiao Yu, claiming you visited every day? Lin Ya, tell me, how many times did you see her here, truly? Not for the cameras, not for her social media posts, but here, in this room, actually caring for me." Lin Ya, still reeling, could only shake her head slowly, her mute silence a damning testament. It was enough. His voice, still carrying the faint rasp of recent awakening, was unexpectedly gentle, yet it anchored her. She stopped, turning slowly, her gaze lowered to his crisp white hospital sheets. He was watching her, his dark eyes no longer glacial, but holding an unsettling depth she couldn't decipher. "Don't leave," he said, the command softened by an underlying plea. He extended a hand, palm up, in an invitation that stunned her. "Come here." Hesitantly, she took a step, then another. The world had just witnessed Ming Hao reject the white moonlight for her, but Lin Ya knew herself. She was the discarded, the forgotten, the useful. How could this be? He saw her hesitation, the ingrained self-doubt. A faint, almost imperceptible frown creased his brow. "You think I was truly oblivious for 2 years?" he asked, his voice dropping. "I heard you, Lin Ya. Every whispered word, every gentle touch, Every night you slept by my side in that uncomfortable chair while my fiancé was off gallivanting with another man. The words struck her like a physical blow. He knew. The sheer weight of his awareness, the silent acknowledgement of her hidden devotion, brought a flush to her cheeks and a tremor to her hands. It was the recognition she'd never dared to dream of. "You are not just my caregiver," he continued, his eyes intense, pinning her in place. "You are the one who stayed, the one who saw past the coma to the man beneath. And I need you by my side. Permanently." He took a deep breath, his gaze unwavering as he met her astonished eyes. "Marry me, Lin Ya. Be my wife." Lin Ya gasped, a faint, soundless expulsion of air. Marriage? To him? The man who was the very epitome of power, wealth, and fierce loyalty? She shook her head, an involuntary gesture of disbelief, trying to whisper a protest that caught in her throat, coming out as a strained, guttural sound. Ming Hao's expression darkened instantly. "Your voice," he began, his hand gently reaching for her throat, his touch sending shivers down her spine. "It's still like this?" He looked deeply into her eyes, a sudden, cold fury replacing the tenderness. "The accident. When I pulled you from the wreckage, it was already damaged then, wasn't it? And the Tsai family did nothing? They actively prevented your treatment, didn't they?" His voice was now low, dangerous. "They used your silence, your injury, as another tool to control you." His deductions were chillingly accurate, a testament to his keen observation even from his comatose state. Lin Ya could only nod, tears welling in her eyes, tears not of sadness, but of overwhelming gratitude that someone finally saw, finally cared. The sudden shrill ring of a phone sliced through the tense silence. It was Ming Hao's personal line, ringing on the bedside table. He picked it up, his gaze never leaving Lin Ya's face, his jaw tight. "Ming Hao," he stated, his voice now devoid of warmth. "Ah, young Master Ming. So glad to hear you're awake and well. This is Director Tsai. I trust you're not too hasty in your decisions after your ordeal?" My poor Xiao Yu is distraught. Perhaps Lin Ya should apologize for her conduct? Director Tsai's oily voice filled the quiet room, leaking false concern and thinly veiled manipulation. Ming Hao's eyes, however, were fixed on Lin Ya, absorbing her long-held pain. His response was a low, chilling growl. "Director Tsai, let me make this unequivocally clear. Lin Ya has nothing to apologize for. Your daughter's distraught state is entirely of her own making. As for hasty decisions, I assure you every move I make is calculated. And I assure you further, your family's neglect of Lin Ya's vocal cord injury, sustained while I saved her from an accident where your driver was at fault, will not go unpunished. Your attempts to exploit her, to steal her inheritance, to silence her, are well documented. Consider this your final warning. If you ever attempt to manipulate or harm Lin Ya again, the consequences will make Xiao Yu's public humiliation seem like a gentle reprimand. And I will make sure you lose far more than just your connection to the Ming Corporation." He hung up without another word, his face a mask of furious determination. He turned back to Lin Ya, his hand gently cupping her jaw. "Your voice will be restored, Lin Ya. And the Tsai family will pay for every single tear they made you shed." His gaze was resolute, a promise of unwavering protection and vengeful justice. The opulent gates of the Tsai family mansion loomed, a symbol of the very power that had shackled Lin Ya for years. Today, however, it felt different. With Ming Hao by her side, his hand a warm, possessive weight on her lower back, the grandeur seemed to shrink, overshadowed by his formidable presence. Inside, the grand reception hall was bustling, filled with carefully selected guests, business associates, distant relatives, and socialites, all there to witness what Director Tsai and Xiao Yu had meticulously orchestrated, Lin Ya's public downfall. Xiao Yu, radiant in an ice-blue gown, stood beside Director Tsai, a practiced picture of demure grace. Her eyes, however, held a triumphant glint as they landed on Lin Ya, a silent challenge. Director Tsai, ever the master manipulator, stepped forward, a sorrowful expression plastered on his face. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice dripping with false sincerity. "We gather today for a difficult but necessary matter. My adopted daughter, Lin Ya, has caused considerable distress to the Ming family and to Xiao Yu with her unfortunate behavior. His gaze subtly shifted, beckoning Lin Ya forward. Lin Ya, for the sake of family honor, for the sake of your own future, you must apologize. Kneel and beg for forgiveness from Miss Xiao Yu and Chairman Ming. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Kneel? It was an unthinkable humiliation, designed to strip Lin Ya of any remaining dignity. Lin Ya's heart pounded, a familiar cold dread seeping into her. She felt the pressure of every judging eye, but Ming Hao's hand tightened subtly, a silent anchor. He stepped forward, a faint, dangerous smile playing on his lips, drawing all attention. Director Tsai, you misunderstand. Ming Hao's voice was calm, yet it sliced through the murmurs like a finely honed blade. Lin Ya owes no one an apology. In fact, it is she who is owed one. A substantial one for years of manipulation, deceit, and outright treachery. He paused, letting his words hang heavy in the air. Xiao Yu's practiced smile wavered. Director Tsai's brow furrowed, a flicker of unease in his eyes. Xiao Yu, Ming Hao continued, his gaze now fixed on her, cold and penetrating. You are a master of deceit, aren't you? You painted yourself as the devoted fiancé, while enjoying the company of numerous others. He pulled out his phone, a sleek device reflecting the hall's chandeliers. Shall we reveal your little secret? The charming Mr. Wang from the textile conglomerate? Or perhaps Mr. Li, the investor you met last Tuesday? My team has prepared a rather extensive photo and video montage detailing your various liaisons over the past 2 years, conveniently compiled from security footage and private investigator reports. It's quite the exhibition. As he spoke, a large screen behind him, previously displaying generic floral patterns, flickered to life. Gasps erupted, not just from the crowd, but from Xiao Yu herself, whose face drained of all color as undeniable images flashed across the screen. Xiao Yu, laughing intimately with men who were decidedly not Ming Hao, caught in compromising embraces. Even a whispered confession of her contempt for the comatose CEO. The air crackled with shock and scandal. Therefore, Ming Hao declared, his voice rising, cutting through the stunned silence, I, Ming Hao, publicly declare the immediate termination of any and all engagement arrangements with Miss Xiao Yu. This union is null and void. He then turned, his intense gaze softening as it met Lin Ya's wide, astonished eyes. Taking her hand, he brought it to his lips, a tender, possessive gesture that left no doubt about his true allegiance. Lin Ya, he said, his voice now imbued with an undeniable warmth that contrasted sharply with his earlier ruthlessness. My proposal still stands. Will you be my wife? Not just my caregiver, but my partner, my love, my everything. Another collective gasp. But this time, it was laced with disbelief and confusion. Then Ming Hao delivered the final, devastating blow. And as a betrothal gift, a small token of my profound admiration and commitment, I offer you 20% of Ming Corporation's shares. Director Tsai stumbled backward, his carefully constructed composure crumbling. 20%. That was an astronomical sum, far more than the entire Tsai family fortune, now being offered to the daughter he had neglected, abused, and publicly scorned. His face contorted with a mixture of shock, greed, and crushing regret. Xiao Yu stood frozen, tears streaming down her face, but they were tears of fury and humiliation, not sorrow. Ming Hao's eyes, still holding Lin Ya's, briefly flickered to Director Tsai. And to you, Director Tsai, he said, his voice losing its warmth, chillingly polite. How curious that you were so eager for Lin Ya to kneel, yet so utterly indifferent to the fact that her vocal cords were severely damaged while saving my life. You neglected her health, ignored her pain, and actively prevented her from seeking treatment. Where was your family honor then? Where was your moral standing when you watched her suffer in silence? A man who sacrifices his own daughter's well-being for a paltry gain has no right to speak of respect, let alone demand it. The crowd buzzed, a palpable shift in allegiance already taking place. The Tsai family's reign of terror had just ended, replaced by an inferno of public scorn, orchestrated by Ming Hao, who stood tall, unwavering, a pillar of justice for the silent woman by his side. Director Tsai, his face a mask of practiced benevolence barely concealing the ravenous greed in his eyes, cleared his throat, stepping forward as if to embrace Lin Ya. "My dear Ya, this is truly overwhelming. 20% of Ming Corporation for a betrothal gift. Such a grand gesture. But Ming Hao, perhaps it's too much for a young woman to manage alone. As her adoptive father, and with my extensive experience, I could certainly guide her in its investment." He extended a hand, a predatory smile fixed on his lips, clearly expecting Lin Ya to silently defer. Lin Ya, however, merely met his gaze, her expression unreadable. She took a small, silver stylus from her pocket and, with deliberate grace, tapped a pre-prepared message on her phone screen, holding it up for all to see. The words, projected onto the large screen behind them, cut through the buzzing tension. "Thank you for your concern, Director Tsai. But my financial management degree from Sterling University, coupled with my second degree in corporate law, equips me adequately. My mother always taught me to manage my own affairs." A collective gasp swept through the room. Director Tsai's jaw dropped, his pretense of paternal concern crumbling into undisguised shock and fury. Sterling University? 2 degrees? This quiet, voiceless girl he'd scorned and exploited for years? The murmurs grew louder, turning into outright whispers of disbelief. Ming Hao, a subtle smirk playing on his lips, placed a reassuring hand on Lin Ya's shoulder, a silent testament to his unwavering trust and the delicious irony of the revelation. The shares were hers unequivocally. Director Tsai, robbed of his prize, could only retreat, his face a mottled mix of humiliation and thwarted avarice. Later, as the chaos subsided and Lin Ya and Ming Hao found a moment of quiet, he held her hands gently. "We've scheduled your voice surgery for next month. The best specialists in the world, at the most advanced facility. Everything is arranged." His eyes, usually sharp and commanding, softened with a tenderness that spoke volumes. He then surprised her further. With a slightly awkward, yet determined, movement, he slowly articulated a few basic signs with his hands. "Hello, beautiful. I am learning for you." But even as the first seeds of their poison took root, the meticulously planned counterattack began. In the sterile, hushed silence of the surgical suite, Lin Ya lay under the precise hands of the world's leading vocal surgeon, her future voice a fragile promise. Outside, the world was about to rupture. Ming Hao, a man reborn from the brink, watched the news feed from his study, a cold, predatory glint in his eyes. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. Simultaneously, a torrent of irrefutable data, forged over 8 years of silent suffering by Lin Ya and polished with Ming Hao's formidable resources, erupted across every major news outlet, social media platform, and financial forum. It wasn't just a leak, it was a flood. The first expose detonated the myth of Director Tsai's business acumen, laying bare decades of intricate corporate malfeasance. Shell companies, falsified financial reports, illicit deals siphoning funds, and a trail of defrauded investors were meticulously documented. Emails, ledger entries, and encrypted communications painted a damning picture of systemic fraud that had kept the Tsai Group afloat on a foundation of lies. The stock market reacted with brutal efficiency, the Tsai Group's shares plummeting into freefall within minutes, trading halted amidst a firestorm of panic. Then came the personal betrayals. Xiao Yu's angelic facade crumbled under the weight of photographic and video evidence, raw and undeniable, displaying her in a series of compromising positions with multiple high-profile figures, not just the ones Ming Hao had already exposed, but others far more unsavory. Her carefully constructed image as the white moonlight shattered into a million fragments, revealing a cynical, calculating opportunist. But the most devastating revelation, the one that truly twisted the knife into the heart of the Tsai family's public standing, concerned Lin Ya's mother. New, authenticated evidence, including a dying confession from a former Tsai Group employee and hidden surveillance footage from a corporate retreat, unequivocally demonstrated that her death was no accident. She had uncovered Director Tsai's most egregious financial crimes and was silenced, her accidental fall directly orchestrated by Director Tsai to prevent her testimony and seize her rightful inheritance, which had then been transferred to Xiao Yu. The accident that stole Lin Ya's voice, previously dismissed as an unfortunate mishap, was recontextualized with compelling eyewitness accounts and internal reports, confirming Xiao Yu had deliberately pushed Lin Ya, fearing she too would expose the family's dark secrets. The public outcry was immediate, ferocious, and unified. Disbelief turned to fury, then to absolute condemnation. Hashtags trending worldwide screamed for justice. Police sirens wailed as raiding parties descended upon Tsai Group headquarters and the Tsai family mansion. Arrest warrants were issued for Director Tsai and Xiao Yu, now exposed as criminals and murderers, their faces plastered across every screen, not as victims, but as the architects of their own spectacular ruin. The Tsai Empire, built on greed and lies, had imploded, every brick of its foundation now visible to the horrified gaze of the world. A soft, persistent hum slowly filtered into Lin Ya's awareness, replacing the dull ache that had become her constant companion. Her eyelids fluttered, heavy and unwilling, before finally parting to reveal the sterile white ceiling of a hospital room. The light was gentle, diffused, unlike the harsh glare of the operating theater she vaguely remembered. Then, a familiar face, etched with a subtle tension that smoothed instantly into relief, swam into view. Ming Hao. He was there, as always, seated beside her, a hand already reaching to gently intertwine with hers. "Lin Ya," he murmured, his voice a low thrum of emotion. "You're awake." His touch, warm and reassuring, grounded her. She tried to speak, but only a dry whisper escaped, a phantom sound that grated on her throat. He understood, pressing a glass of water to her lips. Through the haze of post-operative grogginess, Ming Hao began to speak, his words painting a picture of a world utterly transformed. The news of the Tsai family's downfall had exploded. Headlines screamed, social media raged, but beneath the sensationalism, a wave of public sympathy and righteous indignation had swelled for Lin Ya. The meticulously collected evidence, her mother's story, Xiao Yu's blatant deceit, all laid bare. The Tsai Empire, once seemingly impregnable, had crumbled into dust, its leaders arrested, their reputation in tatters. A quiet sense of justice, not triumph, settled over Lin Ya. The burden she had carried for so long was finally lifted. Days bled into weeks of slow, painstaking recovery. The physical therapy for her vocal cords was arduous, often frustrating, yet Ming Hao remained her steadfast shadow. He learned every exercise, every gentle massage, cheering her on with an unwavering belief that fueled her determination. She would often wake to find him practicing sign language by her bedside, his brow furrowed in concentration, ready for any method of communication she might need. His presence was a silent promise, a balm to her soul. Then came the day. A tiny reedy sound, barely more than a breath, escaped her lips during a therapy session. Her first sound. Ming Hao's eyes, usually so composed, welled with unshed tears. With each passing day, the sounds grew stronger, clearer, until, one afternoon, she spoke his name. Ming Hao. His name, in her own voice, for the very first time. It was a revelation, reclaiming of herself. The joy that lit his face was brighter than any sun. Fully recovered himself, Ming Hao stood before her by the window overlooking a serene garden. He held a bouquet of crimson roses, their petals unfurling in vibrant life, mirroring the new bloom in her own. "Lin Ya," he said, his voice deep with emotion, "you have your voice back, and with it, your true self. The past is behind us. You are free." He extended the flowers, then took her hand, his gaze piercing and full of adoration. "Marry me. Let's build our future, not on the ruins of the past, but on the foundation of our love, our respect, and the incredible strength you've always possessed." Lin Ya smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that reached her eyes. The quiet, long-suffering woman was gone, replaced by a confident spirit with a voice that was now her own. She looked at the man who had seen her, truly seen her, even in silence, and had fought for her justice and her future. "Yes," she whispered, her voice still a little soft, but undeniably hers. "Yes, Ming Hao." Their new beginning, a symphony of mutual respect and unwavering love, had finally arrived.